Welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today is a quick guide on how I painted the easy non-metallic metals on my enlightened force. Now, as always, we'll be starting over a zenithal primer where we primed the entire miniature in black and then just sprayed a light grey from the top of it. Now the first colour I'll be using is Basilicanum Grey. It is slightly thinned in the pot. I think I added about 20% medium to this. And I'm just going over all of the areas that I want to be in the metallic colours. This is a very easy and quick step. The contrast paints will find their way into the recesses, but you will still get some of the volume highlights added by the zenithal primer essentially. The main idea behind these videos is to help you get your Wild West Exodus force painted up for the Gunslinger League. So if you want to see more of this content, more of this Wild West Exodus content, I hope you subscribe for future videos. The next part of the paint job is to add a bit of a highlights to everything, and for that we'll be using some simple white paint. This is a heavy body titanium white paint that I got from Winsor & Newton. I do like these more than the traditional miniature paints because they are a bit thicker, and that just suits them for dry brushing. Now you want to make sure you rub off most of the paint first on a piece of tissue, and then for good measure I always run it across the back of my hand to remove most of the excess paint so you don't get any of those gaudy streakings that you can sometimes get with a dry brush. And then it's just a case of working your way across the miniature, making sure you catch all of the edge highlights of the model, and just make sure that you have a nice and easy cut. You also want to make sure that you hit some of the other parts, like the flesh tones and the leather straps and everything. It doesn't really matter if you hit them by mistake, because these will act as a natural highlight layer if you go and apply contrast paints later on. Up until this point we've mostly been working with grey paints, and metallics aren't just grey, they tend to have some type of sheen or colour to them, and to simulate this I'll be using some deep turquoise ink from Liquitex, and I'll be adding this to a large amount of matte acrylic varnish from Winsor & Newton. This is good but fairly cost-effective stuff that you can use, and I'm just dropping, one drop of it in a fairly large pool of this matte varnish until I get a nice glaze consistency. This is just used to add a bit of colour to the grey, to give it a bit of a blue sheen. I load up my brush with it and then tap most of it off, and even use my finger to remove some of the excess from it. It's just so the shaded areas have a bit of a blue to it, and they are more chromatically interesting than the black and white palette that we've been using so far. I'm not trying to paint any pristine non-metallic metals that are very shiny. I mean, we're playing Wild West Exodus, we're out on the American frontier. I'm pretty sure that some of these things are going to get corroded and quite dinged up as we go along. So I'm just grabbing some matte varnish again, mixed with some rust pigments, and I'm going around applying these not all over the model but sparingly, where you have things like nuts and bolts, things you find on the automata that you would think would have a bit of corrosion on them. It's usually parts where, or areas where two parts meet rather, and especially across rivets and when you have different armor plates. I'm using the same technique again of just applying it roughly, and then if needed I can use my finger to remove any of the excess. And this orange again adds a bit of chromatic interest compared to the teal we were applying earlier on. So it doesn't make it just a simple black and white grey scheme, you get a bit of variation in colour, and this rust is the perfect way to do it. After applying the teal glazes and adding some of the orange rust, you will inevitably have hit some of the white highlights that you created earlier with the white dry brush. So we're trying to fix this again by just grabbing the white paint and going over the model again with a quick dry brush, so we can build up those highlights again, just so that there's no orange or teal reflections on the edges. Just a case of dabbing most of it off again. And this time I'm not necessarily trying to go all across the model. I'm mostly concentrating the dry brushing in a top to bottom like motion to build up those extreme highlights on the edges again that were hit by the rust and the teal glaze. Dry brushing is an amazing tool to get some easy edge highlights on your model, but you still want to accentuate those to get somewhat more of a reflective sheen on your model, and dry brushing inevitably leaves the odd sort of chalky finish to it. So I'm actually grabbing some pure white with my fine tip brush and adding some scratches to all of the metallic bits. Again, the idea is to go for some dinged up metallics here, and so some micro scratches added to all of this not only adds a bit of character to your model, but it hides any sins you may have committed during the dry brushing stage as well. So this is a slightly more time consuming part, but going over these with your fine tip brush and just adding some spot highlights and scratches where you want them really does go a long way to make it look slightly more metallic compared to just doing the old dry brush. That's it for today's quick tutorial video. If you liked it, make sure you hit the thumbs up, and if you want to see more Wild West Exodus in the future, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click that notification bell so you can see all of the things uploading as we continue in the Gunslinger League. Bye!